The flight back home with Susan was to finalize our divorce. During the flight, something went terribly wrong, and the plane crashed. Just before the impact, Susan said something that stuck with me. She said if she had the chance to live her life again, she would marry Nick. She felt he was the one who truly made her feel alive. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer on the plane. Instead, I found myself back in time, on the day I had planned to propose to Susan. I watched as she dropped the flowers I had given her and ran towards Nick, who was standing in the crowd. She hugged him tightly and told him she wanted to marry him. It was then I realized she, too, had somehow returned to the past, just as she had wished. Seeing her happiness, I decided to let them be together. However, things didn't turn out as she expected. Later on, she regretted her decision and begged me to take her back, even kneeling before me. Nick held her close, a look of disbelief and joy on his face as they embraced. The people around us, unaware of the past, cheered and congratulated them. But someone in the crowd voiced the confusion that many must have felt. They asked if it wasn't supposed to be the day I, Jackson, proposed to Susan. Others chimed in, mentioning that Susan was dating me and that I had invited everyone for my proposal. They wondered what was happening, speculating that Susan had rejected me on the spot for Nick. Some expressed sympathy for me, saying it was awkward after I had been such a nice guy for years, only to be rejected. Susan and Nick continued to embrace for a long time. Eventually, Susan took the microphone and thanked everyone for witnessing their love. She said she hadn't realized her true feelings before, but now she knew she had always liked Nick. She regretted missing her chance with him in the past and didn't want to repeat that mistake. She declared her willingness to spend the rest of her life with him, holding his hand until the end. She then looked at me calmly and said that forced love wasn't sweet and that we had been a mistake. She hoped we could part ways peacefully without any further complications. The ringing in my ears from the plane crash faded, and I was once again on the day I was about to propose to Susan. Remembering her last words about wanting to be with Nick if she had another chance, I knew she had been reborn too. Her eyes had the same cold and rational look they had when she was 38 in our previous life, reflecting her years in business and giving her a mature and steady presence. But at this moment, we were both fresh out of college, having dated for 4 years. We had once talked about getting married after graduation as the next natural step in our lives. So I had chosen Valentine's Day to announce our engagement to all our friends, planning a large flower display on the school playground for the proposal. Interestingly, Nick had played a part in this proposal plan. Nick was a year ahead of us in college, the lead singer of a band. He was outgoing, handsome, and carefree. He had fallen for Susan at the welcome party and had consistently tried to get her attention, bringing her breakfast and creating opportunities for them to spend time alone. Even knowing about me, he would say that we weren't married yet and that life should be lived boldly, encouraging her to pursue who she liked. Susan had always given him the cold shoulder, but she had hinted to me that I should propose so that Nick would understand she wanted to marry me and wouldn't choose him if we were ever reborn. On the day of the proposal, Nick stood in the front row, wearing a suit and tie and holding a bouquet of roses. He enthusiastically and loudly called out to Susan, asking if she had really thought things through. He said if she accepted my proposal, they would never have a chance to be together. He asked her one last time if she wanted to be with him. In our previous life, Susan had firmly stated that I, Jackson, would be her husband for life, and that she only loved me, asking Nick not to bother us anymore. But now she called our relationship a mistake and asked me not to hold on to it. Facing the curious stares of the crowd, I calmly told them that we were over from that moment on. I said that we had no ties anymore. Hearing my words, Susan let out a sigh of relief. Nick excitedly spun her around, saying he knew they were meant to be together, but that she had made him wait too long. He jokingly told her she had to make it up to him, asking her to be in the audience every time he sang, which she readily agreed to. He also mentioned our past mountain declaration and romantic beach thing, wanting to create similar memories with her and asking her to post on social media that she liked him, to which she also agreed. Susan looked at him lovingly, as if he were a treasure she had lost and found again. The crowd applauded, chanting for them to kiss. My roommates felt bad for me, saying Susan had gone too far and that it seemed like she was cheating right in front of everyone. They questioned her timing, asking why she hadn't broken up with me before the proposal. They thought her behavior was sickening, inviting everyone for a proposal only to break up in front of them and immediately jump to the next guy, calling it a textbook example of a player. I turned to them and suggested we leave, mentioning a bar that was opening that day and offering to treat them. They watched me calmly drink several glasses, worriedly advising me to let go of Susan and saying I shouldn't be sad over someone like that. They told me there would be someone even better. I smiled, holding on to them, and said that I was actually happy, and that leaving Susan truly made me happy. Susan and I had grown up next door to each other. We were childhood friends from similar family backgrounds, and everyone, including our families, had always assumed we would end up together. We had supported each other through everything, and had promised to start dating in college and marry after graduation. It all seemed to happen naturally, but in our last life, after we got married, life became consumed by work, daily chores, and raising children. Gradually, our relationship had faded. Susan often said that life felt too predictable and lacked excitement. Meanwhile, Nick had become a popular rock singer, and Susan was captivated by his passionate performances at music festivals, watching his videos repeatedly. Eventually, she found reasons to get close to him. Nick, believing in living in the moment, wasn't interested in marriage and had many girlfriends. She intentionally pursued him, and they ended up having several encounters. When I found out, I confronted her. Surprisingly, she suggested that I find someone else too, indicating she no longer cared. Her indifference towards me and neglect of our children were exhausting. I asked for a divorce. Initially, she resisted because dividing our assets was complicated, but she eventually agreed. Her parting words were ironic. She said being with someone as free-spirited as Nick was true happiness, claiming that the 2 weeks she spent with him brought her more joy than her entire past. According to her, I had always been too logical and stuck in a routine, unable to experience a vibrant life. I realized how naive she truly was. She thought she had found the secret to life, but without a solid foundation, all that carefree living was like a sandcastle, easily washed away. I had too much to drink and went to the restroom. I passed a room with a slightly open door and overheard someone asking Susan if what she did that day was unexpected, mentioning that we had grown up together and asking if she didn't like me anymore. Susan exhaled a smoke ring and replied that we had grown up together and our families had set us up. She thought she liked me, but it was just the bond of friendship. She found my rational nature boring and annoying over time. When someone teased her about who she really liked, Susan pulled Nick close and said it was Nick, of course. Just then, someone bumped into me and pushed the door open. Everyone inside went silent. Susan flicked ash from her cigarette and frowned at me. She reminded me that we had agreed to break up and asked if I was going to cling to her, questioning why I was there. Watching her smoke, I wondered when she had picked up the habit, but it was no longer my concern. Nick leaned in and kissed her dramatically, marking his territory. He said he had always said you never know until the end, and that Susan had chosen him, asking if I was going to try to win her back. Susan patted Nick on the back, assuring him that even if I begged, she would never go back to me. I laughed, realizing how well suited they were in their narcissism. I told them not to worry, that I was just passing by and wasn't one to revisit the past. As I turned away, I caught Susan's momentarily dark expression. All the feelings from our past were gone, and seeing them together didn't stir any emotions in me. Then, I bumped into a soft figure. I instinctively held the person's shoulders. She was wearing a strap dress, and the touch of her smooth skin felt startling. I quickly pulled my hands back. It was Molly from our city. She was my age and had been studying abroad, recently returning to take over her family business. In the club's dim light, she wore a stunning red dress, and her fair skin and striking face were hard to miss. She looked up slightly, realizing she had stumbled against me. Embarrassed, she stepped back and apologized. From the room, another voice, presumably one of Susan's friends, said that I was a good guy and asked Susan if she was sure she wouldn't regret her decision. Susan replied that she had said it many times and that my boring and dull nature irritated her. Someone then asked if she and I had been intimate. Susan laughed and said I was so reserved, waiting for an engagement, calling me boring and stiff. Nick chimed in, asking if I had proposed that night. Was I going to give Susan my first time? He then told Susan not to be mad, saying it hadn't happened and suggesting they celebrate, inviting her to come home with him that night, saying her first time should be with him. Molly, smiling, met my eyes. Her cheeks flushed from alcohol. She softly asked if I had broken up and if I was single now. I nodded, ready to leave. Molly wobbled again, almost falling, and I caught her. I asked if she was okay. She leaned against my chest, shook her head, and suddenly threw up. She looked a bit embarrassed and apologized for getting a little too drunk. I sighed lightly and told her not to worry, asking where her friend was so I could take her there. She slumped against me, saying she had come alone and asked me to help her get a room upstairs, as going home in that state wasn't an option. I frowned, thinking it was late, and she was a girl who was drunk. Our company also had business dealings with Molly's family. After a moment of thought, I picked her up and headed upstairs. I stopped a passing waiter, gave him a tip, and asked him to find someone to clean up the mess. Before she went to freshen up, I asked her for her clothing and shoe sizes. She looked surprised. I explained that her dress wasn't wearable anymore and that I would get someone to buy her some clothes. She gently told me her sizes, and I quickly noted them down to place an order. Around this time, my roommate called, saying the dormitory would soon close and I needed to head back. I quickly explained the situation, asking them to go back without me and that I would get a hotel room. Molly soon finished washing up and came out, surprising me as she was only wearing a bathrobe. Despite having no makeup on, her skin was flawless and radiant, and her striking features were still stunning. I couldn't help but notice droplets of water trickling down her collarbone and hurriedly went into the bathroom. Once I quickly tidied up and stepped out, the delivery person had already dropped off the clothes. I handed them to her, telling her it was late and she could rest there. She asked what I would do. I said the school dorm was locked, so I would get another room downstairs. She looked at me and said she had checked while I was in the shower, but the hotel was fully booked. I was astonished, wondering how that could be. She chuckled and asked if I really didn't know it was Valentine's Day. I suddenly remembered, awkwardly hitting my forehead. I offered her the room, planning to catch a cab home, but she grabbed my sleeve, looking at me with innocent, clear eyes, and softly said it was too late that day. She mentioned the room had a double bed and suggested I could stay too. After a pause, she added that I didn't have a girlfriend and she didn't have a boyfriend, asking if I was worried she would do something to me. I immediately replied, "Of course not. I was just worried about her reputation." She laughed casually and joked that neither of us was married, so what was the big deal? And at worst, we could pretend to be a couple, adding that I was handsome, so she wasn't losing out. I hesitated, and she continued, saying she wasn't in a great mood that day, and since we were high school classmates, could I at least keep her company as she was a bit scared alone. The plea in her eyes softened me. Checking the time on my phone, it was indeed too late, and going home meant facing questions from my parents about the proposal. So, we ended up with a bed each. Suddenly, I remembered that in the past she had never married, yet her family's business empire had thrived under her leadership. There were always rumors that she wasn't interested in men, though no one really knew for sure. Once the lights were out, my senses became heightened. Trying to relax and close my eyes, I suddenly became aware of subtle sounds from elsewhere, and the fact that this hotel was fully booked for Valentine's Day dawned on me. Then, a gentle voice softly asked if I was asleep. I replied no, mentioning that I had heard some rustling. A soft, warm body then snuggled up to mine. I tried to move her away, but she wrapped her legs around mine, hugging my waist. Nervously swallowing, I asked Molly if she was drunk. She breathed softly in my ear and said she was very clear-headed. She mentioned she had never had a boyfriend and her first time was still intact, asking if I wanted to try. My mind went blank. I asked if she realized what she was saying. She caressed me and said she was serious, that she liked me and wanted to be my girlfriend, asking if I would give it a shot. I tensed up, reminding her that I had just broken up that day and wasn't ready for anything new. Her lips brushed against my neck. Then she told me to wait in line and look for her first when I felt ready, saying she was really into me and asking if we could just give it a shot. Under the influence of alcohol, the sounds from the next room, and her caressing igniting sparks on my skin, I was on edge. I asked if she was sure she wanted to date me. She reaffirmed that she was. I rolled over, taking initiative, gently kissing her. I reassured her, saying, let's try it. She could be my girlfriend, and I would grow to like her. She closed her arms around my neck, softly agreeing. We spent the night together. The next morning I gazed at her lovely face in my arms and felt a bit of regret about my impulsiveness. Yet, as clarity returned, I realized I didn't dislike her. I even admired her candidness and bluntness. When she woke up, her eyes were momentarily dazed, but then she shyly covered her face with the blanket upon remembering the previous night. Seeing she wasn't upset, I felt relief. Holding her hand, I earnestly asked Molly if she had been serious when she said she liked me, considering we might have both been tipsy. She pulled down the blanket, looking at me seriously, and said of course she meant it. She confessed that she had liked me back in high school, but I was into Susan, so she never dared to say anything. When she heard about my failed proposal the day before, a part of her was secretly glad. She had found out I was at the bar and came, stunned. I hadn't expected her to have an unspoken crush on me all these years. She looked at me, her eyes a mix of shyness and determination, and said that her actions the previous night were consensual, and that she knew I might not be into her, so she wouldn't cling to me, telling me not to worry. Seeing her resolve made my heart race a bit. Even though my breakup with Susan was recent, those feelings had faded long ago, so I hadn't felt this kind of excitement in years. I earnestly told her that maybe I didn't like her as much as she liked me right now, but she was great and incredible, and I thought I could grow to like her a lot. I asked if she would be my girlfriend and give me this chance. Her eyes sparkled with tears of joy, and she said yes. She had driven there the previous day and handed me the car keys. I was puzzled and asked why she wasn't driving. Blushing, she pouted and said it was my fault from the previous night, mentioning her back was still a bit sore. I stepped forward and kissed her on the lips, then asked if she wanted to relax in the car while I drove. I asked her where she was heading so I could give her a ride. She thought for a moment and said she didn't have much planned for the weekend, asking if she could come with me to my school. I said of course she could. As a senior, I didn't have any classes that day, and had just planned to move my dorm stuff back home and start working at the company again. Unexpectedly, as soon as we arrived at the school, we ran into Susan and Nick. Nick was holding Molly's hand. I nodded at them and kept walking, but Susan stopped me and asked where I had been the previous night. I told her it was my business and asked if she wasn't being a bit too nosy. She didn't look too happy. She said someone had seen me and a woman heading to a hotel room upstairs the night before and asked if it was Molly. I calmly replied that I was free to be with whoever I wanted, and that if I recalled correctly, we had broken up the day before, and this was my girlfriend, Molly. Susan moved to slap me, saying we had just broken up and I had gone off with another woman to a hotel, asking if I was trying to get under her skin. I furrowed my brow and blocked her hand, telling her she had it wrong, that I had no feelings for her anymore, and I wasn't trying to upset her, adding that being with my girlfriend the previous day was completely natural. I asked her to watch what she said in the future and avoid causing misunderstandings with my girlfriend and her boyfriend. Nick's expression changed when he heard that. Freeing his arm from Susan, he said I could go to a hotel with whoever I wanted and asked Susan why she cared so much, questioning if she was still hung up on me. Susan shot me a fierce look, but then pulled Nick's arm consolingly, saying she was just concerned as a neighbor and that her feelings for him were genuine. Her heart was only for him, which was why she had chosen him in front of everyone the day before. Susan then smirked at me and told me not to get it twisted, that she had broken up with me the day before because she was worried I would cling to her and spiral into bad habits, and as long as I wasn't trying to upset her with someone else, it was fine. I gave a cold laugh, saying people shouldn't be so full of themselves, that she wasn't the only woman out there, and since she had moved on, naturally I would have a new girlfriend too. Ignoring her furrowed brows, I took Molly by the hand and left, thinking Susan was getting too full of herself and had double standards, assuming she was irresistible just because Nick had chased her for 2 years. Molly's eyes were sparkling as she looked at me and asked if I had called her my girlfriend. Looking at her eyes full of affection for me, it seemed she really liked me. I confirmed that I had, saying I would be responsible for her and that besides, she was beautiful, smart, capable, and had a great personality, making it hard not to like her. I kissed the back of her hand and said I was starting to like her a bit now, and would keep liking her more. She joyfully jumped into my arms, saying she was so happy and had no idea how long she had been waiting for this day. I gently stroked her hair, feeling the fire of love reignite in my heart. The drama surrounding the Valentine's Day proposal on campus slowly faded. Susan and Nick's fans grew in number. He would ride a bicycle with her through campus, enjoying the summer breeze, just like in a campus romance drama. They kissed on a hilltop, promising to love each other forever. They sped through the streets on a motorcycle at night, feeling the thrill of speed. They sang loudly by the sea at night, experiencing the freedom of life. They even tattooed each other's initials on their waists, expressing their intense love. By then, Nick had gained some followers on social media for his singing, and he often shared couple photos and videos with passionate captions, attracting a large audience. Many people said they were a perfect match, like a couple from a novel, and as Susan had hoped in her past life, she finally had a vibrant and carefree youth. When Susan posted a picture with Nick on her social media, both families got the full story. My parents were furious. I could only say it was better to clear things up now than to have cheating after marriage. Besides, I felt nothing for Susan anymore. I told them not to worry and that I had a new girlfriend now. My mom looked at me approvingly, saying I was always so rational and it was good I could handle this well. She then asked about my girlfriend, if she knew her, and when she could meet her. I said I would check with my girlfriend first. My dad pondered and said it looked like we would need a new partner for that project. I remained silent. In my past life, Susan and I were dating, so our businesses always considered each other first for collaborations. That project had been given to Susan back then, but I knew she wasn't the best fit. However, I hadn't wanted to let the opportunity slip away due to family ties, and it also brought our families closer. But in this life, since becoming a family was off the table, we should only consider which partnership would bring the most benefits. During college, I had worked part-time at the company, which made transitioning to full-time after graduation smooth. Besides the daily work, I would attend business events, gaining experience and expanding my network. This weekend, I attended an elder's 80th birthday party. After greeting a few family members with my dad, I found a quiet spot to rest. That's when Susan's sister approached me with a drink. She said she hadn't thought her sister would break up with me. I replied, plainly, that it was the end of a journey. She took a sip of her drink, her eyes evaluating me, and mentioned that she had heard my project hadn't found a partner yet. I shook my head, saying I had no clue, and that my dad was handling it. She seemed to understand, chuckling softly, and said her dear sister had thrown away a winning hand and might not even end up with the short end of the stick. I didn't comment. She looked at me with a playful smile and said she was only 2 years older than me, and if I was looking for an alliance, we could work together, asking what I thought. I politely declined, mentioning that I already had a girlfriend, and said I wanted to be alone for a while to get her to leave. Nearby, I heard someone teasing, saying our Mr. Jackson was quite popular. I turned to see Molly, looking stunning in her off-the-shoulder gown, with her red lips and fair skin. She caught my eye. I said that no matter how popular I was hers. She laughed mischievously, wrapping her arm around my shoulder and saying, "Good realization, boyfriend." I held her hand tightly. Her skin was fair, and her mesmerizing eyes shone brightly. She was beautiful. Susan, on the other hand, had more of a cool beauty. Seeing me staring at her, Molly asked, puzzled, if there was something on her face. I leaned closer to her ear and whispered that she was just too beautiful to look away from, and that I found myself liking her more each day. Her face turned red, but she confidently said that then I had better keep liking her more and more. Of course, she bit her lip nervously and mentioned that Susan's sister had talked about marriage and an alliance with my family, asking what I thought. I raised my eyebrow, teasing her that I was going to marry my girlfriend, of course, and that besides, our family didn't need an alliance for me to run the company. I then playfully asked if she was saying she just wanted to date, but not marry me. She stomped her foot playfully and said, "Of course not." She was saying if I wanted an alliance, I could choose her, as her family was just as good as Susan's. I looked at her seriously and said, I wanted to marry her because I liked her, not for some alliance deal. I explained that in wealthy families, marriages often brought families closer, led to more collaborations, and helped business growth. But it also came with a risk, as benefits could bring people together but also tear them apart. I said I knew my abilities and could manage the company just fine, even without an alliance. Molly squeezed my hand tighter and said she knew she hadn't liked the wrong person. Just as I was about to say something else, I heard whispers from a distance. Looking over, I realized Susan had arrived, bringing Nick along. They were both still in their biker gear, standing out among the formal suits and dresses. Susan's father was whispering something angrily to her, while Nick seemed carefree, holding Susan's arm and glancing around. He asked Susan if she was hungry, reminding her that she had just had fried noodles. Susan led Nick in, saying she had never been to a fancy party and wanted to see if rich people's food was really that good. Nick replied, "All right, whatever she wanted." They acted all lovey-dovey, as if no one else was around. Nick picked up a snack, snapped a selfie, then came over to us, circling around with a baked treat. He commented that rich folks sure liked to make a big deal out of birthdays, with all the suits and gowns just to say happy birthday. Someone nearby couldn't hold back and said that was just how people dressed for events. It was polite, and that Nick was the one being disrespectful in biker gear with messy hair. Nick ruffled his hair and said he was all about that laid-back vibe, adding that the birthday person had even said they were a breath of fresh air, youthful and genuine, unlike the others who were pretending every day, asking if that wasn't tiring. His words sparked anger among those who heard, not to mention towards Susan. She shielded Nick, saying he was straightforward and hoping they didn't mind, but he wasn't wrong. In her past life, she was used to flattery, as she was at the top, but now being this cold without being part of the family business made people unhappy. Someone her age asked Susan what she even saw in him, saying I, Jackson, had everything sorted: status, looks, skills. Suddenly, all eyes were on me. Susan frowned my way first, and then said I was great, but Nick was the best for her. She then grabbed Nick's hand, saying she loved his openness, which made her happy and relaxed. Nick boldly kissed her right there, shocking everyone. Someone scoffed, asking if this was a soap opera. I heard later that after the party, Susan's dad was mad and told her to break up with Nick, apologize to me, and reconcile since I was better for her career. Susan refused, leading to a heated disagreement. I, however, was relieved that Susan was completely out of my life. I thought she should stick with Nick and not turn back to me, or I would feel sick and lose sleep. In the end, my dad decided to work with Molly's project, and she joined the team. He had nothing but good things to say about her skills. When she first came over for dinner, my parents were impressed. Our companies thrived, and Molly and I stayed in touch, our love growing stronger. 2 years later, I planned a grand proposal, inviting friends and family, and asked Molly to marry me. She tearfully said yes, and we hugged in joy. Throughout those 2 years, Susan and Nick lived joyfully. They got married just 6 months into their relationship and even live-streamed their wedding. Nick, who had sworn off marriage, finally did it with Susan, the one she had boldly claimed to want to marry. We had different pursuits and lifestyles now, and I thought that was the end of it. But life seems to be full of unexpected turns. I heard from friends that Susan and Nick had broken up and gotten back together multiple times. Their fan base kept growing, and with Susan's family background, their relationship frequently made it to trending topics. Yet the news about their recent breakup hadn't stopped. There were pictures of Susan and Nick arguing, and videos of Nick dancing closely with other women in bars. I just skimmed through it like tabloid news and focused on my busy work and wedding preparations. After work one day, Molly was holding my hand, and we were about to leave when I got a call from an unknown number. As I answered, I was told to look to the side. Not far away, Susan was standing there with her phone, looking at me. Molly gripped my hand tightly, and I gently reassured her, saying it was probably work-related and I would be right back. Being in the same social circle, I had met Susan a few times, mostly at work events. Molly lightly kissed my forehead, almost marking her territory, which made me chuckle. When I approached Susan, I caught a strong smell of smoke. I gave her a neutral look and said that work matters were better discussed during office hours. She forced a slight smile and asked how I had been lately. I raised my eyebrows and said I was pretty good. She didn't seem to want to talk about work, so I was ready to say goodbye and leave. But she lit another cigarette and said she wasn't doing so well. I frowned at her, and only from her opening up did I learn that since she had started working, she had less time for Nick. Yet, Nick continued his carefree lifestyle, constantly partying with friends and sometimes getting close to other women. Naturally, this led to Susan questioning him, and their arguments became more frequent. Nick argued that Susan wasn't there for him, while Susan believed he didn't understand the pressure she felt to support a family. Nick shrugged it off, saying to live for the moment and questioning the need to earn so much money. Susan liked a free and passionate life, but desired financial comfort too. Back in school, Family support was a safety net, but now as a graduate, she had to earn for herself. Susan had one older sister and two younger brothers, two of whom were from outside of her parents' marriage but recognized by the family. The internal struggle was intense. In our past life, with support from my family, she had gained significant control in her family business. This time around, without my help, even with the memories of a past life, her situation wasn't great. She gave a sardonic laugh and said she was just too frustrated, thought she would find someone to talk to, and ended up there, asking if I thought she had failed. I replied calmly that everyone has their own path, and success or failure depends on how you see it. I said how she was doing now wasn't my concern, as I had a fiancé, and suggested she find someone else to chat with next time. Susan stared at me, seemingly wanting to continue, but I interrupted her, saying my fiancé was waiting and I was leaving, then said goodbye. A month before our wedding, news broke about Nick getting drunk and booking a room with someone. Details were all over social media and people were buzzing. Susan was caught by reporters at her office entrance, looking utterly worn out. Their questions were sharp, and during a live broadcast, she flung a microphone before pushing through the crowd. I saw this news and moved on to policy updates. I then got a call from the main person in that live stream. Her breathing was heavy. She said my name and then said she regretted everything and asked if we could get back together. I told her that there were no more feelings between us and asked her not to say things like that. She insisted that in the last life, she was my wife, and we were meant to be together. Her tone sent a chill down my spine. I told her I didn't know what she was talking about, and if it wasn't work-related, she should stop calling me. After I hung up, I had an unsettling feeling in my gut. The next day I couldn't reach Molly, which was unusual. Later, I got a call from Susan claiming Molly was with her and giving me a location: the school's rooftop. When I got there, I saw Molly pinned near the edge by Susan, shaking her head no and gesturing for me to leave. I faced Susan, barely containing my anger, and asked what she thought she was doing, reminding her that it was kidnapping. Susan looked at me steadily, then suddenly fell to her knees, speaking softly and saying she had made mistakes, and the one truly meant for her was me, not Nick, asking if we could start over. I thought quickly and said we could, but she had to let Molly go first. She glanced at me with a slightly deranged smile and said I was lying, that if she let Molly go, I wouldn't be with her. Standing up, she laughed almost carelessly and said it didn't matter if I said no. She then asked if I believed in past lives, saying we were married and happy with a perfect family, and everyone envied us, adding that this life had been a mistake and she wanted things to go back to how they were. I felt a cold jolt, wondering what she meant by that. Susan looked at her watch and said there was half an hour left before we could start over. I glanced at my phone, suddenly remembering that my plane crash in the past life was only half an hour away. I stared at Susan in shock and asked if she was crazy, saying she had chosen the life she wanted, and just because things weren't going well, she wanted to risk her life to reincarnate again, asking if she knew that when I was reborn, I was right at the moment of proposing, and if it had worked out, we would be married by now and happy. I gave a cold smile and said even if I was with her, she would probably still be thinking about Nick, wouldn't she? Her eyes had a wild look, but she said not this time. This time we would go back to the beginning and start over, and she promised we would have a good life together. I calmed myself, switched places with Molly, and Susan threw down a syringe for me to inject myself with. She said it would just make me weak. Otherwise, she would have no chance against my strength. I took a deep breath and injected it into my body, slowly walking towards her, unsure what I had just put in myself. I felt my strength fading. Susan finally pushed Molly aside, grabbed my hand, her eyes both tender and wild, and said there were 10 more minutes and they could jump together and start fresh. Just then, the police burst out from behind the door and freed Molly. Then Nick rushed in, asking Susan if he knew she still had feelings for me, and what she was trying to do, asking if she was trying to die together. Susan glanced at Nick and sneered, saying that looking back, the time with him seemed fun, but was actually pretty boring. Just drinking and partying, nothing meaningful. Nick laughed bitterly and said then she should have broken up with him, saying it was boring now. But wasn't she the wildest back then? And now that she was tired of it, it was no fun anymore, adding that he really regretted marrying her, and if he could do it over, he would stay far away. Susan nodded and said exactly why she wanted to start over. She checked the time and murmured, "Time's up." I was shocked. I told Susan that even if we did it over, I still wouldn't choose her. She laughed loudly and said that wasn't up to me. With that, she pushed me off the rooftop, following right after. Luckily, I had called the police beforehand. They had used a drone to check the rooftop and set up safety measures and an ambulance below. We landed on a safety cushion. Susan cursed angrily, asking who had asked them to save her and why they had saved her. I spent half a month in the hospital. Thankfully, the drugs in the syringe weren't too harmful. Susan was diagnosed with a mental disorder, and her family admitted her to a psychiatric hospital. Nick caused a scene at Susan's house, demanding a divorce, which was eventually arranged by their families. 2 weeks later, Molly and I had our wedding as planned. Later, we had 2 kids, one taking her last name and the other mine. We walked hand in hand through the years. Those who give their heart receive the same in return.